All right, guys, we did it. It's bittersweet times. Best ball season is almost over. Best ball regular season. Best ball season goes on forever 24/7, 365. But the NFL regular season best ball tournaments are wrapping up tonight. We have tons we can learn from that. And now that's what we're going to start doing. Like I said, the season never stops. We can start talking about things that we can take away, maybe things that we can't take away, and just kind of have a little fun looking back at some of the results of these wonderful, wonderful best ball tournaments with millions going to some of you guys. Liam, shout out Liam for almost assuredly locking up $1 million on Underdog. Got other people already in the chat talking about that they're live to make a run on DraftKings. Tons to talk about, tons of lessons to learn. First episode, the new series on Spike Week, Best Ball Lessons. Let's get it rolling. Just as Paul says, no days off. No days off. We're back in the saddle. We're ready to rock and roll. We had a fun for everybody that made it, whether it worked out perfectly for you or not, like it did for Liam. Whether it worked out perfectly or not, we had a fun day of sweating yesterday. Obviously, the team and that Peter and I got into the BBM finals, made a run, was live to do some damage. Came up a little bit short, but that was a ton of fun. I know some of you guys are in here. Steven, 9th in the Puppy 3 and fading Najee to hang on. That's awesome. Got a lineup that's live in the DK Millie here, which is awesome, which I saw that Herzig is still sitting in second. So a lot still to sweat. A lot still to sweat tonight in this last game, Monday Night Football, Browns Steelers, which what a horrible game to end the best ball season on, right? I guess a horrible 2 games. The Vikings without Kirk Cousins didn't exactly put up much of a fight. And now we get the Big Ben Baker Mayfield game, which I guess in the playoffs last year was like one of the most ridiculous epic shootouts ever, where the Browns got up by 1 million and there was massive fantasy scores. So maybe that happens again. That would be bad for me personally, but maybe good for some other people. Let me see what we got right behind you. Oh yeah, that's Tony. Tony is Tony, you have Najee? Do you have Najee? Is that what you're needing tonight? Let me see. Steven. Yeah. Heard that. Really funny. Best ball's a funny game, right? Like we're talking about lessons here. Like obviously Darrington was one of the guys I was very, very high on. I feel fine about that, right? Obviously, that did not work at all. Obviously was stone dust basically before the season even started with any Darrington sharing. He's my highest owned player. But, results are results and process is process. And looking and seeing what the Titans have done with Dontrell Hilliard and Deonta Foreman without Derrick Henry has, you feel decent about that process. So you just roll that on over into next year. Obviously, you wish you had more Rashad Penny, but he was also looking like a massive bust, doing absolutely nothing all year, and then being the guy that you needed to win the tournaments, right? Like, I mean, you basically needed Rashad Penny to win these tournaments, not only because he had the monster championship game, right? That was Jamar Chase. You needed Jamar Chase because he had the monster championship game. Rashad Penny was the late round running back that was putting up monster scores all throughout the fantasy playoffs. And so it's funny, right? We get really attached to these results. And I think that's what I want to have this show for every Monday. This is obviously the first one. It's very fresh in our minds. So, we can talk about all the things that you guys are bringing up and some of the things that have been posted in the Discord, maybe some of the things that have been on Twitter, maybe some of the things bouncing around in my brain. But ultimately, figuring out, I think the biggest task for all of us over the course of the next, we'll probably start draft, start drafting BBM 3 or something in April. So, just a few short months. We'll be back at this NFL thing again. Obviously, we have baseball for those baseball folks coming up. We'll have the NBA best ball playoffs. We have the NFL playoff tournaments. We have a lot to go between now and then. But over these next few months, kind of diving into some of these things that happened, didn't happen. Obviously we'll have the data from Underdog. I don't think we'll have the data from DraftKings. We might be able to get something from Drafters, right? And just start to dissect a lot of this stuff and see, like I said, the thing that we have to do is take this time to figure out what can we learn from to improve our game and give ourselves a better shot next year, in 3 months, which is crazy. In 3 months or so, when we start doing this whole thing again, what is a real takeaway? And I think that's it's the trickiest line to toe for all of us in all of this, right? Because any NFL season can play out in like millions of ways, and it only plays out in one, right? This Ja'Marr Chase 50-point fantasy game in the fantasy playoffs is like one way that this plays out. But and the Darrington gets hurt, right? Rashad Penny is a smash. Here we go. Must-own players, right? Ja'Marr on the winning teams, Ja'Marr Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Rashad Penny. And this is true. They could have been had in any structure. I totally agree. But it is difficult to divorce yourself from the results and the specific names, the specific structures of winning teams, right? And try not to draw too much, draw the right amount, draw the right things away, right? And so that's what I want to start, just having this conversation with all you guys. You guys are smart. You guys figure this out even better than I do, about how can we use these results to identify actionable information that truly can help us make better teams next year and make better decisions. There's certainly things, we'll get into this over the course of the next few months, that I think I can do better. Everybody, I'm sure, has that feeling. Things that you can do better. But I think everyone's going to have different takeaways from all this. If you watched the Underdog football show today at lunchtime with Josh and Hayden, they went through the current top 10 teams in Best Ball Mania 2, pulled them all up, kind of dissected them. Obviously, all really good teams. Obviously, having one of them, maybe I'm a little biased, but going through the individual teams, if you listen to Hayden and Josh, they did such a good job of talking about, honestly, not even the players, right? Because Amon-Ra St. Brown is Amon-Ra St. Brown. If we get too tied into, there is, of course, some level of player analysis right? We have to have some level of player analysis. It's not just close your eyes and pick whatever player. It doesn't matter. There's a certain level of that. And Amon-Ra St. Brown fit some of that, had plenty of things in his profile and situation to where we could identify him as a late round target. But it could be, he's one example. He's an archetype of a player that I think was a more than reasonable pick. I didn't have him very much, and obviously that hurt me and it hurt Pete and I's team in Best Ball Mania 2. But getting too tied to specific names of specific players or even specific structures. If you watch that show with Josh and Hayden, of the top 10 teams, there was a bunch of different structures. There was mostly 2 quarterback teams. There were some 3 quarterback teams. There were full-blown 0 RB teams. There were full-blown robust RB teams. There was RB. Every structure was basically represented in this final. And then it just came down to, did you have Ja'Marr Chase? Did you have Rashad Penny? Did you have Amon-Ra St. Brown? Right? That was it. Everybody else was just whatever. Devin Singletary was a guy who popped up a lot, obviously, as another late round running back. That was something I think is a interesting takeaway this year, being this year and last year, definitely. trying to take into consideration the COVID madness, right? Obviously, we have injuries every single year, but the situations with these teams and dealing with COVID and the COVID list certainly is a big deal and impacts the running back position even more than other positions, right? Because you get Rashad Penny, I know he wasn't a COVID thing, but you get Rashad Penny stepping into a full-blown workhorse role and just so happens to have also good matchups down the stretch, and you get a smash in the late rounds, right? When Dalvin Cook misses, Alexander Mattison is a monster. You just think about it from a DFS perspective. When Dalvin Cook is out, Alexander Mattison is one of the highest raw point projections of any running back on the slate, right? Even when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are out, Josh Palmer is a good option. He is never going to be one of the highest raw points projections. That he cannot duplicate what Cooper Kupp can do, what Devontae Adams can do, what Tyreek Hill can do, what Jamar Chase just did. So there's some level of that nuance. And I think navigating our way through that with, I want to pull that comment back up again, with those guys can be had in any structure, figuring out how all the puzzle pieces fit together as it relates to structure is a big deal, as opposed to diving, there's like I said, there's a certain level of the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing is a really good one. I wasn't drafting him a ton, and I do believe I probably should have mixed him in a little bit more. He was the exact type of player for drafting Dyami Brown, for drafting pick another late round rookie or second year wide receiver. What's the difference? Right. And so the Amon-Ra thing is not a lesson in Amon-Ra himself or anything. It is that if we know inherently to target those kind of guys, right? Look at the league winners from this year in the playoffs or in the championship round. It wasn't, this veteran, whatever, old guy. It wasn't even the league winners of the entire season. Cooper Kupp was fine. Jonathan Taylor was fine. Mark Andrews was fine, but they weren't the true monster league winners in week 17. Jamar Chase, rookie. Amon-Ra St. Brown, rookie. Rashad Penny, not young, but backup running back, right? And so thinking a lot of those things through is some of the stuff I want to talk about here. Let me hit some comments, questions, whatever. Nick, shout out Nick. What are your thoughts? I'm going to be posting this to the audio feed moving forward as well. So I'm going to try to make sure and read these comments as best I can. Read off any things I'm sharing on the screen, whatever. So bear with me if you are watching on YouTube. What are your thoughts on the later round pass catchers? Hines, McKissick, Gio, etc. Right? The strictly pass catching running backs have no path, essentially no path to a Tony Pollard, Alexander Mattison type role. None of them really paid off. Thinking your better chance at the top is just taking shots on the contingent guys. So that is a lesson I do feel is something we need to consider. Not because just of what happened this year. I actually feel fairly strongly that if James White had stayed healthy, and maybe this is also something that is site dependent, in PPR formats, I feel like James White would have been fairly valuable. We also have the issue with the Washington football team where they completely collapsed, like totally collapsed. And maybe that's something we should have seen coming. I don't know. And Nyheim Hines was maybe a guy we should have seen also taking a step back to JT. If JT is going to continue to ascend, it's going to be continuing to grow a little bit more in that passing game role, which he did. And that obviously hurts Hines. I think to Nick's point, in these tournaments, the biggest thing as we see a lot of years, and it wasn't just this year. And so I think that's important to make sure that we consider. It is guys, again, my reference to like the DFS example. When you're trying to win one of these tournaments, when you get to these playoff rounds, particularly the championship round, James White, Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick are never going to offer you the level of projection and upside to take first out of 160 when you get there. Now, there's obviously a conversation about, can they provide you with enough of a floor throughout the course of the season to help you get there? And then as long as you're structuring your teams with other players of the contingent value archetype, that, mixing those guys in can make sense. It's absolutely something I'm not going to sit here and make a firm stance on the day after the season, the best ball season is over. But I think I was pretty much always a proponent throughout the course of the entire draft season of being much heavier on the contingent value guys. I had more Darrington, right? I was touting, right, the crappy names of the contingent guys. Samaje Perine. Obviously, we know about Tony Pollard. We know about Alexander Mattison. James Conner was like a hybrid between a contingent, right? But he ended up basically being largely hit. His massive spikes were in the weeks that Chase Edmonds was out. So he was partially a contingent value play, but also a little bit better than that, which is why he went in the 10th round or so instead of the 14th or 15th. Rashad Penny, obviously. But I'm trying to think of even some guys that didn't pan out. Damian Williams, he didn't end up becoming a thing. Khalil Herbert sort of stole that, and Damian was also banged up a lot. Kenyon Drake. Those kinds of guys are the guys that can become like projectable RB1s, not like praying for something to go their way, which is what you're hoping for with James White and J.D. McKissic. Something in the game needs to break their way, no matter who's in or out. They cannot physically do what Rashad Penny just did yesterday. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to run for almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Rashad Penny could have had more. They got to the one twice, and they threw it, which was painful. But I generally, to Nick's comment, do think we probably should lean a little bit more to the contingent value guys. That was largely what I thought before. So it also can be a little bit, you try to make sure you're not having a confirmation bias, but it's also, how is the market going to treat all of this? Right? I think what Nick is saying could end up becoming a little bit more of the consensus. And so Alexander Mattison is not going to be around in the 14th next year. Tony Pollard already wasn't, right? And so we'll see. I haven't gone through the very, very early 2022 ADPs or anything like that, but it's absolutely something to monitor. And I think it's a great, because this is what you're looking for, right? We don't know which one it's going to be. It could have been Tony Pollard. Like if there's a scenario in which Zeke goes down, Jesus, he was hurt the whole year anyway. Dalvin, they changed the COVID rules the week, it could have been Alexander Mattison season last night. Obviously, it was a mess without Kirk Cousins, but there's a scenario in which Kirk Cousins plays and Dalvin stays on the COVID list, and you get Madison on Sunday night as the workhorse, in the final week. There's tons of these scenarios, but you're just hoping, right, to hit on that guy that can match or beat the best, the round 1, 2, 3 running backs. Right. And so I think that's a very, very, very interesting discussion point. NFL draft is the 28th through the 30th of April, BBM3 shortly thereafter. That is my guess. I am sure that they have already been having discussions about this. I am certain they are having discussions about, prize pool, all sorts of fun stuff. The explosion of best ball has been pretty crazy. So I am fascinated to see what happens to like the prize pool, when they're launching contests, what types of contests that they're going to launch, etc. Yeah, as Paul said, I'd expect it within a week or so after the draft. I think that is a good take from Paul. And as Paul says, they'll do tournaments that start after the Super Bowl, which is crazy, but it's another interesting dynamic of these drafts that, the rookies will be in there, the guys who have declared for the draft. We just don't know where they're going to be drafted yet. Rob says, for me, the biggest argument yet to be resolved is still the Henderson case study. Good point. Do we take a player rounds ahead of where he was originally going, or are we dead to teams that got him later? And I don't think that there's a right answer. This is another really, really good one. I really like, you guys are hitting on some of my favorite topics already. So this is good. Like I said, I really like thinking about the contingent value versus the, like pass catching type backs. And I really like this because this is going to happen every year, right? Every single year, someone like Cam Akers is going to go down. I don't know. We don't know when it's going to happen during the offseason. Could happen in the preseason. Will almost assuredly happen in the preseason. This year we had several. Someone like this is going to go down. And you're going to have the backup running back that was going in the 12th round now moves up to the 4th round or whatever. Let's just use the 4th or 5th round. Henderson was great. Henderson was really good right before he got hurt. Once he got hurt, then Sony stepped in and Sony was great. But once that ADP shift happens, my personal inherent belief that I, as Rob asks, that I want to question in this offseason and just think a little bit more about is okay, are you truly dead? And part of me says, if that guy, so if he has the Henderson season this year, great. He's a great example because he was good. He was extremely useful, particularly when on your 12th round teams, right? But if he just has that good season, do he still might be a good 5th round pick, 6th round pick. You might want him on your team. And then if he does the Rashad Penny in the championship, are you more likely to win by taking him regardless of the ADP shift? Or are you more likely to win by just flat out fading him now because you know that there are teams that are just, frankly, they're just better, right? I mean, it's not that they're so much better, but they're absolutely better. 12th round Darrell Henderson, particularly if you have a 0 RB 12th round Henderson team or an anchor RB, right? If you had Jonathan Taylor and then 12th round Darrell Henderson as your RB2, that team has a better shot at getting Jamar Chase. That team has a better shot at getting Mark Andrews. That team has a better shot of having Devontae Adams. That team has a better shot of having whatever, right? Name your player that you really wanted, Josh Allen. And so there's that process of thinking that through, but there's also still only so many teams to get through to the final, right? And we saw this year, it's so dependent upon what happens in those first couple of rounds, mainly the second round of who gets through to the final, right? Mark Andrews was on 2/3 of BBM teams, 2/3 of BBM final teams. You had Kupp at 50%. JT was, in my opinion, the fantasy smash of all fantasy smashes because of how weak the running back position was. Kupp was obviously carrying a lot of teams, but JT was unbelievable this year, right? And he wasn't on that many teams because he wasn't very good in those first, by JT standards, in those first couple of playoff rounds. And then you didn't need him to win. Obviously Liam won with Jonathan Taylor, but he wasn't. Rashad Penny lapped him. Devin Singletary beat him. I think David Montgomery beat him. Plenty of other, Sony Michel had, I think Sony beat him. There was lots of other running backs that were available to beat Jonathan Taylor. And so anyway, that going back to the Henderson point is knowing what we know inherently about those playoffs, there's absolutely a case to be made that just give me the good guys. Give me the guys that are good on the good offenses, and I'll take my shot when I get there. Right? Because if you have Amon-Ra St. Brown and somebody else doesn't, and we get to, you have Jamar Chase and you have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Darrell Henderson has a good game, does it really matter? Does it really matter if you got him in the 6th round or the 12th round? I'm not sure. Like I said, my inherent natural thought process is I'm not interested in taking that guy at a massive ADP shift, but I think it's something that we should be thinking about for sure. Eric says, the hardest part is getting through the playoffs. My team would have smashed in the finals, but was out in the first round of the playoffs. Do we need to be looking at week 15 and so this is another good one. Do we need to be looking at the playoff matchups more? And I was already maybe a little more so than some other people. Definitely in on looking at the playoff matchups. But even then, the counterpoint to the playoff round matchup stuff is it's really not that easy to know. We came into the season thinking the Chiefs defense was terrible, and the Chiefs defense was not terrible. We came into the season thinking the Cowboys defense was terrible. Cowboys defense was absolutely not terrible. Not at all. Quite good. Shut down tons of teams. Trying to think of, some other ones. So like some matchups that we're banking on being good. Now, I do think we can, the Texans were going to be a good matchup no matter what. The Lions were going to be a good matchup no matter what. Probably the Jaguars. I think on the barbell ends, I think we could probably have a pretty good idea of who the super, super elite defenses are and who the super, super bad defenses are. Kind of anywhere there in the middle. And even then, people probably thought the Cowboys were on that very bad end of the spectrum. Or you get injuries. Look at the Ravens. The Ravens were not a defense we were particularly excited about targeting ever, like and by any stretch of the imagination. But by the end of the season, they're playing with practice squad defensive backs, and they're the best matchup in the NFL for passing games. And you could run on them too. I mean, Sony ran on them like crazy. So that's the hard part. What I will say about looking at those matchups, I think it would behoove us to think a little bit more of the correlation, but strictly from a correlation sense, not from a predicting the best games. Now, there is still a little bit of, I already like, so the Dallas Arizona game was obviously one that almost became a meme, right? Everybody's like, oh my God, Dallas and Arizona, and it flopped. The game flopped. But if you already, are on these teams and these players, it makes sense clearly then. Like, we like the Arizona offense. We like the Dallas offense. So naturally, if I draft a Dak stack and I'm deciding between James Conner and Gus Edwards, like, just take James Conner. You know what I mean? If you're deciding between Rondale Moore and Elijah Moore, you take Rondale Moore on the Dak stack. But that's the point. I think it is, do the same thing, even if the matchup doesn't look good. You drafted a Brady stack. We didn't really think we necessarily wanted to target the Bucs, but take Michael Carter over whoever. Take Elijah Moore over whoever. Apparently we should have been taking Braxton Berrios in the last round, but you get the point. I think the correlation thing actually is a little bit more important maybe than the field will give it credit for, because it's so hard to get through that I want to find a way to minimize the amount of things I have to get right. I have to get the regular season right anyway. And that's like none of this other stuff, like in the regular season, whatever, hope to run good, right? Draft well-structured teams, be smart about your portfolio, and then hope to run good. But once we get to those playoffs, we see how hard it is to get through, even when your team's really good, right? Your Joe Burrow stack, your Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack died in round one. I'm sure thousands did. Tough shit. You're out of luck. You had an awesome you had a Rashad Penny, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Joe Burrow, Chase stack. I'm sure some of those died in the first round. And so figuring out little levers that we can pull, I think, throughout the course of our drafts is important. They don't move the needle a ton, but little things that we can do, I think are important. Oh, Josh. Josh says, congrats, Eric. So cool to see that sweat yesterday. All the different builds in the top 10 is going to make the next hot best ball summer so much fun. Man, I could not possibly agree more. It was so fun to watch. Like I said, if you haven't watched, make sure you go watch the Underdog Football Show. They streamed earlier today. Hayden and Josh, as usual, were awesome going through all the top teams in BBM as it stands right now, which, of course, if this game goes absolutely nuclear tonight, that will shake things up. But I think looking at the leaderboard, it's fairly close to set. I think Liam is pretty locked into first, and probably even the top few are pretty locked in. And in general, I think it's going to be a little bit tough for people to make up. There's some Chubb teams, Claypool teams, Najee, but I think it's going to be a little bit tough for them to make up some ground. But what they were illustrating is, like I kind of mentioned it earlier, all the different structures, even honestly the different players, right? When one player goes for 50, you're going to need Ja'Marr Chase, right? And Amon-Ra St. Brown ended up being close to that because of how cheap he was. Same thing with Rashad Penny. Outside of them, like I'm just using our team, Peter and I's team, like as an example. We had Rashad Penny and Ja'Marr Chase. We did not have Amon-Ra St. Brown. We did not have Jonathan Taylor. We did not have Cooper Kupp. We did not have Mark Andrews. We did not have Deebo Samuel. We did not have any of the like highest owned players. We had Devontae Adams. That was like our chalk. Devontae Adams. We ended up, I don't remember if we used Dak. We had Dak and Mac Jones at quarterback. Actually weren't very popular, even though Dak blew up. Even though Dak blew up in week 16. Dak wasn't all that popular. The Cowboys were not popular at all. Mac Jones was certainly not popular. Mac Jones stacks were not popular. But when you see people drafting with structure in mind, that's what ends up creating a little bit of that. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase wasn't popular. There was only 10 teams in the BBM final with Ja'Marr Chase. And so like the fact that there's all these different paths to winning, from structure, from, running good with a player in the finals. I think these conversations are going to be so awesome over the course. We obviously have tons of smart people like Josh, like Hayden, like Peter, like Herzig, like Leone, like I'm missing tons of people. So many people doing really, in-depth analysis on all of this that we're all definitely going to get to be a lot better. And it's going to be a lot more kind of fun to figure out the next step in this game, right? We all just spent a ton of time talking through this crazy game that we play. And now, like, it's only going to get crazier. There's only going to be more people thinking about it. There's only going to be more people producing content and stuff like that. And so how do we adapt and evolve now, knowing basically, I think we all pretty much knew, what Josh was saying about anything can win, right? And absolutely anything can win. Zero running back can win. Robust running back can win, blah, blah, blah. Now that we know that, how do we take that moving forward, right? How do we use that to our advantage in these tournaments? Paul says, once you get to rounds 15 through 17, there's a lot of luck involved. How strong is the group? Yeah, this one, I tweeted about this too, and like it's painful. My highest scoring teams in both of the first two rounds of the playoffs did not advance. Like some of my weaker teams were advancing, and it's like, that's just part of the variance of the game. Like you said, when you get placed in a group, as Paul said, how strong is the group you're put into, and do the other teams have a lot of players in common with you? If you got placed into a group that happened to only have 2 Cooper Kupp teams, or 2 Jonathan Taylor teams, or whatever, right? You were the only Mark Andrews team, even though he had a high advance rate. It's just luck of the draw. That team probably advances, even if it's not that strong. And so that natural understanding that natural variance exists, it's important. It's really, really important to understand that we're playing in this game with like oodles and oodles of variance. And so that's why all this structure and all this kind of stuff, because you're just trying to set yourself up to run on the good side of variance. You know what I mean? Tony has a team that's live in the DK Million. He had 6 rookies, right? Perfect example of, kind of a player take, but not a player take, a player archetype take. We're trying to find the guys, like shocker, 2 of the 3 guys you had to have this week were rookies, because in week 17, assuming health, the rookies are ascending. The old guys are not ascending. And that happens most years, many, many, many years. Nick says, I got so anchored to late round picks, which in hindsight is the exact wrong thing to do. Take your stands within reason early and be very open-minded in the late rounds. Yeah, I think the late round thing is definitely another one we'll talk about a lot. So I'm not going to catalog all these comments because you guys are hitting all the perfect subjects for future shows. I think there's, again, like anything, there's this line we have to toe, right? Even on these late round picks. I obviously took a stand on Darrington Evans, which buried me. But figuring out, no matter what round players are going in, figuring out, this small loss, big win, what's the payoff, what's the, figuring out this EV calculation on all of these players, in particular, to me, the payoff part of, that's what Rashad Penny, I mean, look at why Leone and lots of people were talking about Rashad Penny, look at the payoff. The payoff was winning $1 million or having a shot at winning $1 million on these late round guys. So if you went ham on Rashad Penny, Nick, you would probably be feeling, a little bit differently. However, I think, like I said, you're towing this line on, you only have 150 shots. And so if you spread yourself too thin, even on late round guys, the odds that you have the team around the late round winner, around Rashad Penny, so if you draft 5 to 10% of everybody, you've already cut yourself down to 10 or 15 of your BBM teams. Now you only have 10 or 15 of those teams. Those teams have to be one of your best teams with that guy, right? You have to avoid injury. So it is a tricky balance between not going overboard and ruining your entire season off of one stand that you made, compared to spreading yourself too thin and not giving yourself enough outs if you are right about certain, and again, not even certain players, but like an archetype of a player. Darrington was an archetype of a player. I believe that the payoff was big on him. If you preferred somebody else, you preferred somebody else. I think I'll piggyback on this point, Nick, and say what I want to do with the late round picks is honestly just be a little more thoughtful about different players that are probably in play at the ends of drafts. So obviously there's two very clear names that jump out in this type of discussion. And it's Eli Mitchell and Cordell Patterson. Like not even being drafted, not being drafted like at all in these drafts. But clearly, like now when we look back, part of it is probably a little bit of hindsight bias, but the other is Eli Mitchell was, if you want to replace Eli Mitchell with Jeff Wilson, you could probably replace him with Jeff Wilson. Now, Jeff Wilson was hurt. It's a little bit different scenario, but Eli Mitchell's competition was another rookie, Trey Sermon. And we know about the value. Every 49er skill player was going in the top 8 rounds. So we clearly valued the team situation very highly, as we should have. We saw what Debo did, blah, blah, blah. But, we weren't thoughtful enough to be like, well, I'm taking these other ambiguous situations. And like, what has Trey Sermon done to earn this level of respect? I'm not saying that Trey Sermon shouldn't have gone where he should. I believe he should have. But he hasn't earned the level of respect to not even ever consider Eli Mitchell. That's all I mean. Same thing with CPAT. It's like, who the hell do the Falcons have? We were talking about Mike Davis as the prototypical dead zone running back. Quadri Allison, Olamide Zaccheaus. What are we talking about here? His paths to fantasy relevancy were there. We just didn't want, we didn't think it through. And I don't say I didn't think it through enough, and then you get a little tethered to some of the ADP and stuff at the back ends of those drafts. Like that's just human. But so I'm not even going to go as far as to say, I don't want to make any stands at the back ends of drafts, but I think this is also kind of part of that. I want to be more thoughtful about those guys. Like I want to go through the guys that are being undrafted and be like, okay, what's here? Last year, I think I was just pretty lazy about it, letting the market sort of decide who was relevant back there. When we know at the ends of drafts, the market has no idea what it's doing. None. Zero. There's guys getting, Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman are like 14th round picks and they're not even on the team. Travis Fulgham wasn't even in the NFL. So, I think that the late round stuff is definitely something we'll be talking about. Mark says, was drafting injured players like Will Fuller and Curtis Samuel a bad process? No. Will Fuller, yeah. I didn't take a ton of Curtis Samuel personally, just because I preferred other players in that range, but I definitely drafted Will Fuller plenty, particularly on DraftKings. The injury thing is just like, what do you do? I wish I had something super profound to sit here and say, but what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, there's absolutely paths that existed for Will Fuller to have a great year. Obviously, they didn't happen. Jalen Waddle goes bonkers, right? Mike Gesicki has a good season. I don't. Like I said, I wish I had something super profound to say about the injury thing, but some people will tell you, Will Fuller is injury prone. Curtis Samuel is injury prone, and those people would have not drafted Will Fuller a couple of years ago when he was the league winner of all league winners. So injuries are just part of the game. It is what it is. We unfortunately just have to stomach it. Look at Derrick Henry. If you I was not drafting Derrick Henry. If you were super, super high on Derrick Henry, you were right. This guy was on path to one of the most legendary seasons of all time. Just got hurt. Were you wrong? Other than being a running back lover, which, as we know the pitfalls of the running back lovers. Kidding. I know that there were a lot of running backs that did well. Injuries, just an unfortunate part of the game. Eric says, we do know for a fact that hardline conclusions and entire strategies will be formed for next year based on how this season finished. Of course, it's important to learn and grow as a player, but I get the sense that because there are a few league winners, i.e. Penny, Amon-Ra, Chase, Burrow, there will be more player-centric takes and player chasing when we know the edge is in construction. Mic drop. Boom. Nothing to add, Eric. Would you like to switch? Are you the real Eric? Would you like to switch places? Nailed it. Nothing to add. Perfectly summarized. We know that construction and sound strategy, sound portfolio management, blah, 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 is the key to the game. There are small edges, in my opinion, in player eval, player archetype, team takes. There's absolutely edges in all of that. The issue is that the market generally takes all of that too far, and thus it is much more valuable for us to focus on the structure and non-player centric side of things, as Eric so eloquently outlines. I think I want to be less scared of committee backfields next year. These guys have upside with built-in floors. Yep. I think that is fair. I think the Cardinals showed us that, obviously in the right situations. A committee back on the Jaguars, not so good. Shout out to everyone who declared James Robinson the league winner after ETN went down. Committee back on, even on the Chiefs. Shoot, look at Darrell Williams. I know he's not quite as much of a committee back right now, but every time Darrell Williams gets out there, even if he's playing 60% of snaps, he smashes, right? James Conner and Chase Edmonds both had usable weeks, and then they additionally have the contingent value. You also need to make sure that exists, right? So to this point, targeting committee backfields is honestly kind of a good thing because of what you said. James Conner was getting 1-yard touchdowns every week, even when Chase Edmonds was healthy, because the offense is scoring points and he has that valuable role. And then if we have identified the situation where when Chase Edmonds goes down, it's James Conner's show. He's the workhorse. James Conner is now going to be like what we talked about earlier with Alexander Mattison, whatever, where the guy goes down. He's now going to be one of the highest raw points projected running backs, right? If you're doing DFS projections or you're doing a season-long ranking, when Chase Edmonds is out, James Conner is what? Top 5 back? For sure, top 10. And you got him in the 10th round because the contingent value exists that he becomes a borderline workhorse or is a workhorse when that guy's gone. Now, if you identify the committee, the Ravens, right? Gus Edwards goes down. Oh, baby, Tyson Williams time. Well, Tyson Williams obviously wasn't good enough to play. And then even then, it's a committee between now they're two dusty running backs, but it's still a committee. Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray both still playing. Honestly, the Pats were like a fringy one. Damian Harris was the lead, right, in a committee. We knew that inherently. coming in, especially once Sony was gone. We knew that Damian was going to be the guy. Ramondre would need to grow a little bit, right? We were seeing Ramondre in healthy inactives and stuff early part of the year, but James White had the passing role. Damian Harris saw a small boost in the passing role when James White went down, and then was a pretty significant lead in all the rushing stuff until a little bit later in the season when Ramondre did emerge. So they were like this kind of like hybrid type situation where it was always valuable, and then there wasn't as much contingent value with like a James Conner, but there was kind of enough on a good offense with a good offensive line, playing in a lot of good game scripts, blah, 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 that it made it very valuable. Let's see here. Yeah, Jonathan says injuries are bad luck. Now, not drafting with MT was one of my biggest wins, and Fuller was a big L. Yeah, ain't that funny with the injuries? That's how it always goes. Erica says also, how there's so many Erics? Do you guys just only go to streams of people with the same name as you? Do Josh and Hayden, like I think I've only met like one or two Haydens in my entire life. Do all the Haydens go watch the Underdog Football Show? Every comment I pull up is a new Eric. This is weird. This is what 2022 is going to be? Every time I show up, it's just going to be a bunch of different Erics commenting on my stream. Thank God. Spoiler alert, we're going to be pumping out a lot more content, written and media, for Spike Week, so you won't have to only stare at my ugly mug. So we'll test this theory to see if all you Erics out there go to when somebody else is hosting the stream. Anyway, I forgot to read the question. Also noticed a couple of teams, Eric says, by the top that had two running backs from the same team, so handcuff their running backs. Is that something we should do more? That's actually something that's definitely interesting. I think another one similar to some of the previous comments that I want to think a little bit more. I don't have a firm, concrete answer to. I think my general lean, similar to the Henderson thing, is that I still believe pretty passionately that we don't want to handcuff our running backs because of the upside that it's capping. However, there's certainly maybe a little bit more argument than we would have ever given it to the fact that navigating your way through all of this with, through the regular season and through the playoffs, with ping-ponging a little bit of, guaranteeing that RB1 spot to navigate your way through this is something to at least have a discussion about, I think. I think it becomes difficult because it's one of those things where, again, I mentioned earlier, you only have 150 bullets in the chamber in one of these tournaments, and you have to draw lines in the sand somewhere. You no matter what you think, no matter if you think I'm just gonna spread everything out, I'm gonna cover all my bases, you're just never ever gonna cover all your bases. And so we absolutely just have to draw lines in the sand somewhere on certain strategies, structures, absolutely players, teams, whatever. And everybody has to do that for themselves. And I think, at a certain point, like I said, you have to make a decision. And that's one of the things that I think probably does not fall into my portfolio. But I think it's at least a little bit more as we evolve in this best ball game. I think it's something that we can at least maybe think a little bit more about and look into some of these situations. And I don't mean look into like the best ball data on it, right? The tournament data. Oh, there's teams that fit, like you said. This is not me mocking you, Eric, even though I just mocked all the Erics. Looking into like the actual football results data of, okay, how is this actually setting up for our best ball teams? When Dalvin misses 5 games in a year and we get 5 Alexander Madison RB1 weeks, how is that? How are those points coming to us? How is that affecting our overall roster? Right, blah blah blah. Looking at that kind of thing, as opposed to just oftentimes people will grab these best ball results and be like, look, see, 5% of the teams in BBM handcuff their running back. We need to do it. And it's like, that's not the way that we should be thinking about this. That's not predictive, even though we may think that it is. Like, look, that team was good. It did well, and they handcuffed. We need to go in a little bit more in depth. We need to be, more thoughtful and think deeper and figure out the why, and figure out not only the why, but the predictive value of the why. So let me see. Anthony says if we could track best ball ADP over the course of the season, it will allow us to draft a better sample of players. Something I am working on for you guys. I'll have a lot more on maybe hopefully next week or within the next couple of weeks, everything that we're hopefully going to be pushing out tools wise and all that kind of stuff with Spike Week. Working on that for sure. I'm way behind here on these comments. Who's the Leonard Fournette of next year? Thanks in advance. I will hang up and listen. Don't ask me because I wasn't drafting Leonard Fournette. Somebody else is going to have to answer that one for you. I am the big dumb idiot that was stubborn on Lenny, and it did not go well for me. Let's see, there's good comments. Champ also says, why is no one talking about Fuller? How does a broken finger warrant missing the entire season? Man, I don't know. That one's I don't know. That one is tough. Yep. Here's a good late round example of, I also was taking Colin Johnson. I also was drafting a fair bit of Jags stacks, which holy shit. I can't imagine a worse mistake, honestly. I would rather have drafted 100% Darrington Evans than drafted any Jaguar stacks. If I had to choose between those two things, knowing the results that I know now, I would rather have 100% of an injured player who never, ever, ever contributed to my team than stomach having Jaguar stacks, particularly on teams that like are live or something like that. So anyway, I was drafting Jaguar stacks. And as Tony says, he made a stand on Colin Johnson. And my thought process was the same. I'm fairly excited about this offense. Fourth wide receiver, that's at least a little bit murky. I mean, there's people out there that didn't like Visca. DJ Chark clearly has not particularly proven himself. Colin Johnson was running with the ones during training camp, blah, blah, blah. Well, turns out Colin Johnson stinks, gets cut by the Jags, and never to be seen from again, basically. Let me see. Yeah. Another Anthony says, too many backdoor Lawrence Colin Johnson stacks. Rob says, I also think we should anchor ourselves to offenses instead of Siri somehow caught me and was listening to a rant about Colin Johnson and just pulled up. Apparently there's a Colin Johnson that plays basketball for Coppin State, if you guys were curious. Played. Yeah. There you go. Played 1991. He was born in 1991. So there you go. You don't get just best ball data here. You average 2.9 points per game. Shout out Colin Johnson. Probably the only time Colin Johnson from Coppin State has ever been shouted out on a show, and I bet he didn't think it was going to be a best ball show. Anyway, Rob says, I also think we should anchor ourselves to offenses instead of just players, and only one off occasionally on the offenses because we know they're going to be bad. This seems obvious, but we still talked ourselves into it. Mayfield, maybe we were just wrong about the Jaguars. The Giants got to be the best example of this, right? The Browns have an elite offensive line. They had Odell, they had Landry, Chubb, Hunt, whatever. Baker stinks, but there was reasons to be optimistic about the Browns. The Giants, we were still taking. I mean, Saquon is, I guess, Saquon, but we were taking Saquon in the first or second round. Every year we talk ourselves into Evan Ingram. Why? Beats me. Sterling Shepard was okay, right? But obviously got hurt. Sterling Shepard was a fine pick. Kadarius Toney was a fine pick and just never stayed healthy. But I mean, the Giants are just a train wreck, an absolute train wreck. We did the same thing with the Bears. David Montgomery ended up fairly decent, but Bears offense not very good. Bad offensive line. I think another thing from Underdog, the Underdog Show, smart people. Listening to the Brandon Thorns of the world about, who are going to be the best offensive lines. The offensive line thing is crazy important. How many of the best offenses in the league have bad offensive lines? The Bengals. About it. It's probably about it. And it's masked because they have freaking Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, CJ Uzomah is even good too. Outside of that, most of the good offenses are offensive line. So I actually think offensive line is something that I was putting stock into, but that could be something as well from a lessons learned perspective. Let me see here. Thanks, Tom. I know. Thanks for the reminder. I'm never, ever going to forget this season because of Darrynton Evans. I may forget, had a sweat for $1 million. The Trey Lance thing was obviously a debacle. I may forget all of that stuff. I will never forget Darrynton Evans. I mean, I have literally watched Darrynton Evans Madden streams, hoping he would like when he was hurt. Is he going to say something? I'll be back in a week, something? Nope. That's the kind of effort you get from over here. We'll watch Twitch streams of our favorite players to see how their injury is going. Let's see. Josh says, as we're slowly starting to wrap up, I want to keep trying to hit some of these questions. Josh says, really appreciate all of your intense interest in Underdog and best ball in general. Made the summer and the season an absolute blast. I agree. A year, a summer, a football season, I'll never, I'll never forget it. And this is just the beginning. I mean, all you guys, unreal, absolutely unreal. I never dreamed. Here's a lesson I've learned. I never dreamed. I started the best ball journey in April or so. Made the pitch to my bosses and stuff, because I work full time in the DFS and sports betting space. Basically, I made the pitch to my bosses that I think we should go after this best ball space. No one is really doing it. Obviously, Josh and Hayden did, and there was some other companies attacking it a little bit. I made the pitch that we should go after this thing pretty hard. They basically gave me, I'm blessed enough to have the runway and the leash to kind of take this thing by myself and run with it. And so I never would have dreamed me just randomly starting up and doing streams about best ball in April, May of last year would turn into us in week 17 before Monday Night Football, all sitting here talking about all the things that we've learned and meeting all of you guys and you guys meeting each other and I'm meeting Josh and just an unreal year, man. Absolutely unreal year. Hopefully anybody that has sweats going into tonight, it works out for them. I know we have a lot of people in the Discord, including Liam, that are having monster years, and it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Let me hit just a couple last minute items here before we wrap up. Oh, the rookie stuff. That's say Matt Corral ends up in Denver. Will you have more or less Denver stacks than you had Jacksonville stacks this year? Was Herbert an outlier above the mean and Lawrence an outlier below? That is an excellent question. I think my take was that this quarterback class this year was both this take was wrong, by the way. I thought that this quarterback class was an outlier in terms of both the general, median overall talent level and the ceiling and probably the floor. All of this was wrong. Literally could not be more wrong. My take, you're also getting those guys coming into, in general, good situations, right? Even down to Mac Jones. I thought Lawrence had a pretty quality offense around him and is one of the best quarterback prospects ever. So I felt confident in him. They all run, right? Trey Lance is a runner in what you couldn't dream of a better situation for a rookie quarterback. Justin Fields, runner, right? Not quite as good of a situation, but decent enough, I guess. Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, and then Mac Jones even, right? It's the Patriots, totally fine situation. And so I think I may have got a little bit out over my skis with some of that, and some of the Herbert results certainly could have played into that. But I also think it was a very, very one-off situation between the combination of the skill sets and skill levels of all these different quarterbacks, as well as the situations that they were landing in. Matt Corral, in my opinion, would not even fall into the top. He isn't better. He isn't a better prospect And I'm not an expert prospect evaluator, but I do watch a lot of college football, and I play a ton of college football DFS. Matt Corral is not on the same level as those guys. So the rookie thing next year will be pretty interesting because the class is nowhere near. I mean, it's one of the worst, actually, quarterback classes. And so someone like Matt Corral or Kenny Pickett or somebody's absolutely going to, Sam Howell's going to make me eat those words, I'm sure, because that's just how it goes. But I think, it's going to be, and the market might take this season too far. And then I will be coming back saying, well, now all these rookies are going in the 15th round, so maybe we should take them. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So that's going to wrap up episode 1, Best Ball Lessons, spikeweek.com. In case you guys missed it, this is the first in a new moving forward content schedule for the next foreseeable future. And there will be more content, written, media, everything added in moving forward. But now that we kind of gotten through this season, I want to get into a groove. We'll obviously be talking NFL playoff best ball soon. The playoffs for, all my NBA best ball grinders, MLB drafting will be coming. And before we know it, the NFL best ball stuff will be back up and running. So I'm going to get into this groove Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Monday, Best Ball Lessons. Wednesday, a new show called Best Ball Bros, which I am not going to spoil. I'm really excited about that one. And then Fridays, we'll get back into the drafting game with calling it this super secret, top secret Drafters Club, where we'll get back in drafting game. Whatever is relevant at that time, we'll do some draft streams. We're bringing in guests and just tons and tons more content and tons more stuff coming with Spike Week. So I really appreciate all you guys' comments. I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me. Like I said, catch us on Wednesday. Every show will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. All of them. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So we can kick off your weekend. We can get you through hump day. All that good stuff. Best ball never dies. Best ball is 365. What a world. What a world we live in. 365 days a year, best ball. Love you guys. Be back on Wednesday. Catch you in a couple days. See ya.